Combining the best of daily fantasy and survivor pools, Stat Hero is the next chapter in fantasy sports. No more competing with the sharks or experts ever, because your only competition is Stat Hero itself. The face of DFS has changed. Finally, a game designed for the rest of us.
Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. Week 12 fantasy football is upon us. The fantasy playoffs are coming up. And of course, we got to know more than our opponents if we want to win in fantasy football. And that's what we're all about at PFF, diving into the stats so you have that in-depth knowledge to dominate your opponents. So let's take a look at 5 advanced stats that you need to know here for Week 12 fantasy football. And we're going to kick it off. I mean, I guess it's not the most advanced stat, but we're going to kick it off with an interesting one that I observed here for this Atlanta-Tampa Bay game. You know, heading into this week, Jameis Winston and Matt Ryan are the league leaders in 300-yard passing games. Both of them have 7. Now, of course, Matt Ryan played 9 games so far this season, Jameis with 10. But still, when you think about that from a passing productivity standpoint, there's just so much fantasy upside in this game. We know on the Matt Ryan side of things that you can throw on Tampa Bay. We've seen quarterbacks do that over and over and over again this season. Now, Atlanta's defense has improved, though, over the last 2 weeks since they made the change at defensive coordinator. So we shall see here. But, you know, the nice thing, even if Jameis Winston gets picked off once or twice or, I don't know, 4 times, he's just going to keep throwing the football. That's a big part of where these 300-yard games have come from for him. So expect a lot of fantasy production in the passing game in that contest. Let's move to the second stat here. And here's an interesting one with Devin Singletary. He has 10 runs of 15-plus yards on the season. Singletary has had a lot of upside. That is in 63 carries. If we look at the rest of the running backs who have double-digit runs of 15-plus, the next lowest carry total is Derrick Henry, who has 187. He has over 120 more carries than Devin Singletary. The explosive ability is off the charts with this kid. If you grabbed him, we've seen the Buffalo Bills go to him more in the last few weeks. This isn't the best matchup against Denver this week, but you have to absolutely love Devin Singletary's upside in that offense. All right, stat number 3. Over the last 3 weeks, the wide receiver who leads all wide receivers in targets is DJ Moore. Not Michael Thomas. How about that? DJ Moore has 35 targets over the last 3 weeks. That's a big-time number right there. He got it done in the first 2 games. He went up over 100 yards. Last week, he was almost there, and that was a bad game for Kyle Allen. What I love to see is when players can perform at the wide receiver position, especially even when their quarterback isn't performing, or in general, they can perform for fantasy purposes when their team isn't performing, like his teammate Christian McCaffrey. DJ Moore is continuing to trend in the right direction. If you have him, he is knocking on the door of wide receiver 1 territory. You have to be starting him as a wide receiver 2 this week. All right, let's talk about the quarterback position. Hey, it is a tough week at quarterback. If you happen to have Patrick Mahomes or Kyler Murray or even Kirk Cousins, obviously, or Phillip Rivers maybe, but probably unlikely Rivers, you're probably looking for some help at the quarterback position. If your waiver wire is picked over some of the premium streamers like Baker Mayfield, let's say, are already owned, well, you could do a lot worse than Jeff Driskel. As crazy as this sounds, with Matthew Stafford banged up, obviously, Driskel's had to start over the last 2 weeks. And what we've seen out of him is surprisingly good fantasy production. This guy was the number 5 fantasy quarterback last week, and why is this happening? Well, he's getting it done with his legs. Over the last 2 weeks, only 2 quarterbacks have more rushing yards than Jeff Driskel. Their names are Kyler Murray and, of course, Lamar Jackson. Driskel has 88 rushing yards over that span. He's gotten in the end zone. He's not the best passer, sure, but he does have good weapons in the passing game, obviously with Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay. So he can get it to those guys, let them make things happen, as we've seen over the last 2 weeks. And then in addition to that, with what he adds with his legs, you could do a lot worse. And how about this? He's facing Washington. We know that Washington has been a very favorable matchup basically all season long. Jeff Driskel is in play as a streamer this week. As crazy as it sounds, this is where we are right now in fantasy football. All right, let's round it out here with the 5th stat. Since returning in Week 10 Kareem Hunt has 16 targets. Only 2 running backs have more targets over that span, Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara. So in other words, he's being used like an elite receiving running back. He's not getting much done in the run game, and that's fine. That's Nick Chubb's area in that offense. But if Kareem Hunt continues to see this work in the passing game, he is going to be a fantasy asset down the stretch as an RB2. Hunt with the PPR production, especially if you're in full-point PPR leagues, you get all of those added points for his receptions. But even without those points, he has a little bit of upside in the passing game. He's adding those extra yards as a receiver. It's as crazy as this may seem, and it's rare for teams to be able to do this, but the Browns could very likely sustain 2 top 20 fantasy running backs down the stretch. Obviously, Nick Chubb, hey, especially this week against Miami, we have no worries there. But Kareem Hunt also in the mix as an RB2 play this week, and a big part of it, all those targets. I know you want more of these stats, and of course we have more of these stats for you. You can get all the stats that I just mentioned, plus a whole lot more if you start digging into the website. Of course, we also have rankings, projections for fantasy. We have all kinds of other football goodness. So if you want to dive into those stats and more, go check us out at pff.com.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.